So here we are back with the Reverend Raymond Broshears file from the Jim Garrison papers. It appears though we've reached a juncture. It appears as though we have reached a portion of this particular file that strays from discussing Mr. Broshears. I find this was a pretty common pattern within Garrison's papers. Oftentimes what he would do is he would duplicate certain documents and then he would put them in with other files, I believe because he was grouping ideas together. Like when you go through Sergei Arkacha's file, the first 20-30 pages they don't mention Arkacha once. It's all about the Winterland. And so then you have to scratch your head and be like, why did Garrison put all this stuff on the Winterland in Arkacha's file? Well, obviously he knew that the Winterland story was a crock of bull, and he knew that Arkacha was the one who went to the Winterland, not David Ferry. Hence, he put all of the Winterland stuff, or a big chunk of it, pertaining to David Ferry, on the trip into Arkacha's file. So he didn't have to explicitly come out and state, hey, I think Arkacha was the one who went to the Winterland. You can determine that by telling how he grouped his files together. And so let's see if we can't figure out what Garrison was thinking by putting some of these non-related or appearing non-related documents in this particular file on Reverend Raymond Broshears. So this, I can tell you with certainty, is documented or duplicated, I should say, under a different batch of files known as the Garrison lead files. There's about a half a dozen of them, maybe a little more. But this definitely came from his lead file, and it even says so up top here. And it says reference Arkacha. A couple things are scratched out, and then below that it says reference Ferry plus Arkacha plus Cubans plus Leighton Martins plus description of Shaw at his filling station, referring to David Ferry's filling station, not Clay Shaw's. So this is a document from the Office of the District Attorney, Parish of Orleans, State of Louisiana, December 6, 1967. Statement of Herbert R. Wagner, Jr., age 43, 427 North Delton Street, Metairie, Louisiana. He's the president of Herb Wagner Finance Service, 1905 Airline Highway in Kenner. Vice president of the St. Charles Parish Credit Bureau. What's the date on this? December 6th of 67, right in the midst of the investigation by Garrison. I shall begin. I probably got to know David Ferry at the New Orleans airport, where I have owned several airplanes. I owned these airplanes from 1946 on. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, I definitely got to know him because in 1952, when we opened the Kenner Finance Company, I remember making direct loans to Dave at the time. I got to know the man. He was a very interesting man to listen to. I used to just sit down and when I had time and just talk to him. We did become friends. It was not just a business relationship. He even came to my house and visited us. Dave was always tinkering with something and he had no tools, and he was always borrowing something. He borrowed to the point of almost being a nuisance. I believe that Ferry probably considered me one of his personal friends because he would take me into his confidence on financial problems and personal problems that he had. In about 1958-59, he came to me with some kind of harebrained idea he had. He was going to go to Central or South America on some kind of treasure hunt or something. He always had wild plans like this outside the United States. On June 14th, 1961, he came into my office and introduced me to Sergei Arkacha. And he told me that Mr. Arkacha was a government agent and that the government checks were delayed and that he was needing a loan, and Ferry would be able or would be willing to guarantee or endorse this loan for Arkacha. In the process of taking the application, it showed that Arkacha was a New Orleans delegate for the Cuban Revolutionary Front and that his previous employment was with the diplomatic corps of the Cuban government for 10 years. At the time, Arkacha made this loan, which was for $338.82. He gave the following references, namely, a Captain Von Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, who lived at 6942 Canal Boulevard as a personal friend. A Richard St. P. The spelling is incorrect here. The correct spelling is Saint, S-T, period, P-E-E. Here it just says Richard St. P-E with one E. Living at 6971 Louis XIV Street as a friend. A Mrs. Naomi Marshall, 408 Camp Street as a personal friend. This is the only loan Arcacha made with me. At the time, I did see a state's government diplomatic ID card with his, looks like, picture on it. I verified his employment by calling Jackson 58508. This loan became very troublesome in collection, and it became necessary for us to continuously try to contact Mr. Arcacha to collect it. Arcacha came into the office of my company, the Herb Wagner Finance Service, on several occasions with other Cubans, also with David Ferry, Arcacha, and Cubans. One day at my company, Dave called me one afternoon and asked me if he could meet me at my office after working hours, as he had something very important to talk to me about. When Arcacha and Ferry came in, we sat down and talked for a while, and he told me, "Herb, you can be real valuable to us." Ferry looked at me and said, "Did you ever hear of Operation?" And then he stopped and looked at Arcacha, and Arcacha shook his head in an affirmative manner, and then Ferry said, "Operation Mosquito." I made some little funny remark about so many mosquitoes in the area, and he said, "No, Herb, with your knowledge of motors, you could be helpful to us." Of course, he then went on to explain to me that they were planning a sabotage campaign to Cuba, to sabotage machinery and transportation and so forth. I stopped him at that time and said, "Whoa, you've got the wrong man." I went on talking to Dave as a friend and said I was married and have responsibilities and could not become involved in it. He said that we have to train other people to do this. Could you give us a hand in that direction? I told him, "Dave, I would rather have nothing to do with it. If you have a fundraising campaign or something I can help you with, I will go along in that direction gladly." Dave then contacted me several days later and asked, "Herb, did you give it any more thought?" And I told him, "Dave, I just borrowed a hell of a lot of money to open this business up, and I can't fool around with this kind of stuff. I have to make every minute count." He told me, "If money is the only thing keeping you from this, well, we can get money." A few days later, Dave called me and said, "Herb, do you want to fly with me to Miami?" I said, "Hell no. What the hell are you doing in Miami?" He said something, and I said, "Do you mean to tell me you're flying to Cuba?" He said, "No, let's say we're taking airplane rides." I told him, "Dave, you must be some kind of nut. You know the government's got radar everywhere. How in the heck are you going to Cuba?" And he said, "The government knows what we're doing. As a matter of fact, they're backing us." He called me on another occasion later on and came on real friendly this time. He said, "Herb, have you been getting any flying in lately?" I told him I couldn't afford to fly. And he said, "You're a damn fool. With what you know about navigation and flying, you can make money." I told him, "How in the hell can you make money, Dave? Just tell me that." And he said, "We're taking people in and out of Cuba at nighttime." I didn't want any part of it. The next thing I can recall, Dave opened a service station called Dave Al's Gulf Service, 2316 Veterans Highway in Metairie. I have a business card with Al Bobouf and David Ferry's name on it, which you have a copy of. On one occasion, I went to the service station, and Dave used to call me Von Wagner, and the notes above indicate this would be in 1964. And he called out and said, "Von Wagner, you square-headed German, come back here. I want you to help me." I went back to the station where Dave was at. He had 2 rifles, and he was attempting to mount scopes on them. I don't know what kind of rifles they were. He asked me if I would assist him in mounting the scopes with them, and I told him that this was work of a gunsmith. And he said, "Hell, anybody can do it. Any machinist can do it." And he got kind of peeved at me. There were several others back there with him, but I didn't get a good look at them. I told him, "Dave, all you're going to do is mess up a good gun." And I went back out to my car. Dave did not say why he was trying to put scopes on these 2 rifles, and I didn't ask. Do you remember if Al Bobouf was present at the time? I cannot remember. On another occasion, I went to this service station, and Dave and a bunch of teenagers were there, and they were tearing apart Dave's plane. I asked him, "What are you doing to your plane?" And he said, "I'm going to rebuild it." The airplane stayed there for some time disassembled, and then it disappeared. Mr. Wagner, previously, you mentioned that you read in the Warren Report or in a magazine that Ferry's plane was not in flying condition at the time of the president's assassination, and further, you related to me that you know for a fact that this plane was in flying condition. Is this correct? He then says, I read somewhere, I believe it was in the newspaper, that Ferry's plane was not in flying condition. But then I recalled of going to New Orleans airport with David Ferry, making a collateral appraisal on the airplane for the purpose of making a loan. And I asked Dave at the time, the airplane looked raggedy, and I said, does this plane have an airworthiness certificate? He said it did. It did not look like it would even run. He opened the cabin door and jumped in, and before I could say anything, he started the engine and said, come on, take a ride. I got in the plane, and we flew over New Orleans and Metairie, and so forth. From outside appearances, I can see now how anyone would think it was not flyable. I obtained from David Ferry the following information on his airplane to make the loan requested. 1948 Stinson, 108-2, serial number 108-1293. Franklin engine number 12974. North Federal Registration, FAA Department of Commerce, number N8293K, white and blue. Value at the time about $3,000. This amount was kind of high. When Dave became involved in a crime against nature charge in Jefferson Parish, I was a character witness for him. He also had a priest from Loyola. Several nuns showed up there, but they were not brought in. Guy Bannister showed up, and many other people I didn't know. I remember talking to Bannister personally, and I talked to the priest personally. Were you a member of the CAP? No, Dave asked me several times to join it, and had been a regular. It had been a regular adult CAP. I would have joined, but from my experience through the airport, it was just a glorified Boy Scout troop, just kids. Did you know Leighton Martins? Yes, I did. I met him through David Ferry. Where, I don't know. Martins also appeared at the trial with Ferry as a character witness. I showed you a picture of Clay Shaw. Can you recall if you have ever seen this man or ever heard the name of Clay Bertrand? There was a big fellow who walked with a very slight limp or a lope. He was not crippled or anything, who used to go around Dave's service station, but I cannot say this man is the same in the picture that you've shown me of Clay Shaw. I cannot remember anything else about this man. Did you know Lee Harvey Oswald? No. Do you think you could recognize any of the Cuban people you have seen in the company with Ferry or Sergio Arcacha Smith? Through the Cuban-type people that you have shown me pictures of, I can't recognize any of them, and I think that Cubans all look alike. It should be noted that Mr. Wagner was shown all the pictures in our mug files on subjects connected with this investigation. The only ones he could identify were Guy Bannister, Leighton Martins, Al Bobouf, David Ferry, and Sergio Arcacha Smith. Let me tell you this. 5 times since the assassination, my house has been ransacked and nothing taken. 4 different times my office has been ransacked and nothing taken. 1 time my camp on Blind River was ransacked and nothing taken. These can all be verified by police reports. Something else I remember is that when Ferry had the service station, he asked me if I would like to go across the lake with him for a weekend to tell people or show people how to damage engines. All right, now it looks like and that's the end of the statement of Herbert R. Wagner, Jr. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff on David Ferry. It looks like this next document, it looks like we're onto something else. I see mentions of California, militant, raided night. All right, I believe that this might actually be some information from Jules Rico Kimball. Don't quote me on that yet. I'm pretty sure, but let's just read through this and we'll make sure. Remember, Jules Rico Kimball, very much like the Reverend Raymond Broshears, was one of these outskirts, hang-around guys. Wasn't even around at the time of the assassination, and I don't believe that Jules Rico Kimball, he was not definitely in like an inner circle at the time of the assassination in New Orleans or Dallas or anywhere relevant, I believe. He was probably being used on other stuff, but I'm rambling, so let's just continue on. Well, to make a long story short, I was in the same outfit as Oswald was in the Fair Play for Cuba committee, only apparently he wasn't in it so deeply and in a different part of the country and at the same time. Now, bear with me now because this is a very difficult explanation to a certain extent. My wife gives me a bit of rough time when I discuss this situation. I think I'll bust her in the eye to be truthful about it. Anyway, the FBI contacted me when I came back and I blew the whistle to them for a year while I was still an officer in that outfit in Chicago, Fair Play for Cuba Committee. I appeared in a hearing with the rest of them. Now, I was never a communist, right-winger, left-winger, or anything, you see. I was merely interested in the revolution, which I hated a little bit. I could fly a little bit or push an airplane around a little. Now, can I make a more important point? After my time was up there, which was a year, when a hearing was to be held, I was told by the FBI that they wanted more information from me, and that was it. They didn't explain or anything, and it was sort of a letdown. I was going to whistle on my former friends. I thought I was convinced by them that I was doing a proper job, and they kicked me down, so I blew out of there and came to California. And that was in 1961, the day they were holding the hearing. They didn't want me around, apparently, so here in 1962, I joined up with a bunch of anti-Castro people, Cubans, Americans, and others. And then I found my way into circles of the political right, you see, who were very effective in trying to do away with Castro. At least they were talking about it. That's all they did was talk about it, believe me. I bought the right-wing line and thing, and I am not against them right now, as a matter of fact, except that I found out a lot of things that horrified me. I peddled their line for them because I thought in turn that they were going to help us get rid of Castro. They were anti-communist, anti-Castro, and all that stuff, and I hated Castro because of what the communists were doing embarrassed me, made a fool out of me, and wasted all my efforts, and I was going to get even. So this right-wing thing was the way to do it, and I swallowed it. I thought it was a great idea, the Americanism, patriotism, and all that stuff. As time went on, as I look back, I didn't know it at the time. It was always the anti-cunity bit. He's a dirty communist and this and that. And as I figured, it was just a bunch of hogwash, and I'll go along with the people just to get action against Castro, and the individuals were donating heavily, you see. Well, the Birch Society was talking against Castro. In other words, Cuba free in 1963 and everything. These individuals were actually doing something about donating money to these different organizations, preferably to Hall and Howard got it, and other people got it in New Orleans, Dallas, Florida, and so forth. The money finally got to them in the medicine that came from the doctors. Notice the key mention of Hall and Howard. Question, when you say Hall, you mean Lawrence D. Hall. That's funny. That's alias. It is. A nickname, by the way. His name is Lorenzo. And Lawrence Howard is Larry Howard. I'm sure Weisberg knows this. The rest know this, too, that Larry Howard is a Mexican-American. Lorenzo Hall is a Cuban-American. That's bullshit. He was born in Newton, Kansas, okay? His name is Lauren Hall. He's a white guy. Claimed to be a Cuban for alias purposes, but that's the reality. The number 3 man was a guy by the name of Guy Gabaldon, a Mexican-American. The one-time big hero they made a movie about called Hell to Eternity. A former Marine, if you recall it. I do vaguely. Let me pause right there. The Guy Gabaldon stuff is really pretty fascinating because if you've heard my work, you've heard me talk about William Seymour, Lauren Hall, Lawrence Howard as being the trio that went around setting Oswald up everywhere. And it was a trio. Lauren Hall was kind of a shitbag, and even shitbags Larry Howard and William Seymour knew this, and so they eventually ditch him after the assassination. But Guy Gabaldon was like the fourth fucking Beatle for a while. He was the number 4 guy in that organization, and he, from what I can tell, did not really want anything to do with the assassination attempt. He was most likely in Mexico City at the time the assassination went down. He was hanging with these guys all over the place, and they were hanging with him down in Mexico City at times. But when it came to the assassination itself, I haven't put him in Dallas. I haven't connected an extra Mexican anywhere in this story. And so, yeah, Guy Gabaldon becomes an extra footnote into the assassination, but I've yet to be able to connect him really directly, and I'm honestly not looking that hard. Allegedly, he was behind an attempted plot to kill Kennedy on a trip Kennedy was going to take to Mexico City, and allegedly the Mexico City police and the Mexican federal police found out about this and, deported him to America because he was an American. But, yeah. So that story kind of goes nowhere. The Mexico City stuff, I'll do a show on Mexico City one time because ultimately the whole Mexico City trip with Lee Harvey Oswald is total bullshit. It was done by Kerry Thornley, and it was not pulled off in the manner in which they tell us it was. And But in Mexico City, there was an intelligence network going on involving Wynn Scott and Guy Gabaldon, E. Howard Hunt, and a bunch of these guys. Allegedly, there was a training camp down there, but the training camp is more distraction. It becomes irrelevant. There's a lot of emphasis put on Mexico City when really it's just a footnote, but it's a very interesting footnote, and I promise we will get to it one day. So he says the number 3 man was a guy by the name of Guy Gabaldon, a Mexican-American, the one-time big hero they made a movie about called Hell to Eternity, a former Marine, if you recall it. I do vaguely. They play it every year on Channel 9. Well, anyway, the point is these people, I find later, were in it long before Weisberg and all the rest of those people came along writing books, and it bore on my conscience. I informed the proper authorities about my involvement so I wouldn't become pinned down when they finally arrested them for associating with assassinators of President Kennedy. Now, immediately I thought, and I told Lady Oswald, so, my gosh, woman, your son is doing the same job I was. Yeah, this is definitely Jules Rico Kimball. That was my impression. You don't get wrong impressions when you're in a mess like that. And later on, the evidence came out that he was this and that. So I said, well, apparently those people were the ones that did it. And then I thought, they didn't want Kennedy dead, but the right wing was always trying to kill him. Gabaldon said he was going to kill him in '62 when Kennedy visited Mexico City. He had an office in Mexico City, by the way, running an anti-communist front called Drive Against Communist Aggression. This was Gabaldon. The person doing the questioning is one of Jim Garrison's guys. This was Gabaldon. Gabaldon, Howard, Hall, me, and all the rest. He was financed by some big businessmen here of whom I have the list of names and whom I became very friendly with. Now, I don't know if you're getting this proper or not, but you can ask me questions. He had an office there. He had some friends in the Mexican Federal Police, the FBI of Mexico, who we tried to get help with this Kennedy deal down there, to shoot Kennedy in Mexico City when he was on parade there. And I thought, well, the guy was crazy. He's not talking sense, and he didn't really mean that he was going to kill Kennedy. These people, Oswald and whoever they blamed for it, and even if he was involved or not, which I doubt that he was in any way, at least I think he was thinking on him just like I was up to those people up there. They hated Kennedy, you get it. No fair play for Cuba Committee say they hated him, but I heard the right wing say they hated him. Them dirty bastards should be dead, God damn him, and all that sort of thing. When I was on the other side, I believed what they believed in. I didn't believe what the left wing believed. I finally got to believe what they believed. I couldn't follow it. It didn't make sense. But I understood that they called him a communist. Actually, I was against communism, but I wasn't long with them just to do away with Castro and aid the people that were going against Castro. Okay, now they had this office in Mexico City. The federal police officer, Captain Juan A. Arana, practically had him assassinated. Gabaldon assassinated for trying to present the problem of killing Kennedy there. He ran him out of Mexico City. Question, he knew what he was up to, in other words? Sure. He told them they'd been friends for a long time, this anti-communist stuff. Then Gabaldon tried to sell, remembering Gabaldon, Howard, and Hall was one group with a bunch of other people. Of course, I remember. They all associated. I knew this, and I thought it was great. Anyways, he couldn't swallow the whole trap that Kennedy was a communist, being Mexican, and he wouldn't believe it. He just couldn't see it, so they rounded them all up and threw them out of Mexico City. That was it. They took his furniture that he had in his office and seized him, and no one knows about these things. If Oswald went to Mexico City, he went there. Now here is another shot. Gabaldon and I, one day, to John Rousselet of the John Birch Society and Sam Moreno in their old office down the street from there, the present one, to get $10,000. You might think I'm some kind of damn fool, but I'm not. I want to see these dirty double-crossing finks get what they got coming because they continue to be a threat to me. What we believe is true, and obviously it is as true as the daylight now showing. I don't care to prove it. And all that garbage where you got to prove stuff, that doesn't mean anything to me. Goddamn. Goddamn. Jules Rico fucking Kimball is going off, ain't he? He don't give a goddamn fuck, does he? He don't mind spilling the beans on what he knows because he knows what the fuck happened and he feels threatened and he realizes what's on the line. Remember, these people want to make America one big barbed wire prison. Jules Rico Kimball sees it. That's why he's talking to Garrison. I want to see these dirty, double-crossing finks get what they got coming because they continue to be a threat to me. What we believe is true, and obviously it is true as the day is now showing. I don't care if prove it and all that garbage where you got to prove stuff. That doesn't mean anything to me. He wants justice. Question. But you want the information to get out. That's right. I've written all this down and I'm looking at my briefcase and that contains every name and address and everything I ever did. Do you remember that portion that Mr. Weisberg spoke? And he talks about the visit to Odio. It says Sodio Odio apartment, but it's Sylvia Odio's apartment. He goes, right, in my organization, sure, certainly I remember that. When I saw that in October 1964, I said, my God, they have really did it. They've really reached out when Howard and Hall's name appeared. What about William Seymour? Billy Seymour? It looked like Oswald. And I would say that. How come no one has ever gotten the whereabouts of Gabaldon, you know, the FBI? Now let me tell you first one thing before the 10,000 bit is finished. Senator Hoover. Now you know what I know about the Bureau is, and you can't blame him. No, I mean you can't blame him, but for this point, national security was always drummed in our minds. And anytime I open my mouth, they talk about national security. Please don't say anything to me. Now I agree with national security and it is immoral sometimes, but national security reasons alone, he has done what he has done. Question, he put the lid on this thing, in other words. He put the lid on. He aimed to keep it on there at all costs. He has to because these people, they're representatives of the people, and I am discussing now, are so powerful in the United States that they can knock the president off if they want to if he doesn't come toe the line. The right wing said about this communist, but it isn't so. It isn't the right wing that is really that way. Mr. Hunt and a lot of the big shots that I'd agree with, they can do these things and they will. If things don't go right, now I am sure surprised the right used to cry, we don't have any money, we don't have any power, we don't have this. Why, they organized the Birch Society and they got it financed. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not an enemy of theirs. I read their books right now. And their material, and I agree with a great deal of it, but nevertheless, it doesn't make this fellow any less guilty of associating with Gabaldon and that bunch of creeps. The 10 grand Gabaldon said he didn't get when I waited outside the office. He went inside and talked to Rousselet. He said he didn't get it, but they talked for hours. They talked for 4 hours. The 10 grand was supposed to go to Mexico City operation, whatever that means. I don't know. When I was invited down there, Gabaldon and I were both flying airplanes. He invited me to co-pilot for him. I never went down. I was afraid to go to Mexico because of the mess I'd been in with Castro, and he got more effective agents. In Mexico? Yes, the 10 grand apparently he didn't get, but I think he did get it. And John Rousselet was supposed to kick back whatever benefits to the Birch Society. That was Gabaldon's work. It didn't ring a bell with me then. Later on, or a personal friend of mine was working with the little savings and loan place, and it turned out this very poor fellow, Mr. Rousselet, whom I know quite well, and as I have said many times, he was in cahoots. To many people I have said this, but I never went into an explanation of the whole thing. He made a loan of 19 or 24,000 on the 1st of 63. So you can't say he didn't have 10 grand to do it with. I got a copy of the loan. When I saw that, it even added up more so. I am not one given to fear, but I am just telling you that is the way things are. And when I see all these guys like Mr. Weisberg and Mark Lane, I have talked to him on the phone. He kind of figured out I was some kind of crackpot. But they are aiming at a thing, and I have known for years. And if they really are wanting to do something, let them do this. Let them say these things. Let me get up and say these things, and I'll say them. We'll bring this thing to a head. I'll tell you why exactly Mr. Hoover is covering up from my point of view, is having been an undercover fink for them for a year, is for national security reasons. I agree with him, but he's still covering up, and that's it. And many another thing has happened in the interim. They're all written down here. I don't know if you recall. I just wanted to ask if there was a Leopoldo. That could have been an underground name of Lorenzo. That came to Sodio Odio's apartment, but that's Sylvia Odio, okay? So I think it was Lorenzo. Leopoldo was working with an underground name. Howard wanted me to run an office here in 63 before Kennedy was assassinated to inform the press, making press releases and collecting money, which I didn't do because I was doing other things along right-wing lines to run an office here to get press releases underway just as they were about to happen against Castro. Howard is a warrior. Hall was a political person that made speeches at Birch Society meetings, open meetings, and closed meetings, and was very well accepted by them. He made a lot of money, I said to Gabaldon one day, what is he doing with all this dough? Is he really putting it into the anti-Castro operations? He said, every penny of it goes in there, I guarantee you. And I took his word for it at the time because he was sort of leading things. Another thing, Gabaldon, when he came back from Mexico, he ran his drive against communist aggression, which was financed from here. I have all the literature on it and remember all the details. He made speeches all around Arizona, Canada, Detroit. He was all around, therefore helped build up the network, he said. Everything is ABC. Was there such a network in Dallas, too? Well, sure, it's in Dallas. I'm associated with a junior member here now. They're inactive, by the way. If there is something going on, at least they are keeping it quiet. They probably suspect me of being a fink, I suppose, but I really think because we were such good friends a while back that there's really nothing popping just right now. They work and naturally take advantage of the situation. Right now it is not profitable or possible. Where's Gabaldon now? Oh, he's hiding out in Mexico. See, all those guys took trips quietly. You know, when the FBI can't find they are all well hidden. They couldn't find Howard or Hall for a long time. I saw Gabaldon about 6 months ago over in El Monte, a Mexican restaurant there. He and one of his former backers, who was a big wheel in the Freedom Forum, and his name was Ray Fleischman. Now, for Ray and those opinion doctors and so forth, we $10,000 worth of medicine for anti-Castro operations in the Mexico City deal. Was there any link between the group and with Ruby in his activities in Cuba? I don't even like to talk about that guy because I can't stand anyone. I feel sorry for him and the way he died and so forth, but I knew he would just like Mr. Lane and Mr. Weisberg knew. I have to apologize, this isn't always written out properly. Some of these transcripts are missing words and whatnot, and I just kind of read it as it is. So, he was a dirty rat, and that was in the scheme somewhere. I don't even like to talk about a back shooter, in other words. I got no use for him. He's cheated everyone and helped make the big lie. Obviously, if that woman said he was involved, he probably was involved. I'd discuss it with her if I were researching the situation. Which woman are you referring to? I think Mr. Lane or Mr. Weisberg wrote about some woman who put a finger on Ruby as being a payoff man. You see, we were all in Cuba at different times. Okay, so he's probably talking about Mae Brussels. Just my opinion, but that's probably who it was. You were there too? Well, sure, just for a short time after the war. There was some of the government there, some of the big wheels, and any of them that went there were either for or against. They had some deal going with the government, see. They were involved. In other words, they didn't just go there looking around because the peasant armies and marching people are building and things are really going on down there. So you just don't go down there to look around. It is just not a good tourist spot. It's a revolutionary activity. So Ruby was there, and that convinces me he was involved. Did you know anyone there by the name of Praskins or Pratkins or anyone by the name of McWillie? I knew those names. They're in the same report that I'm in. Oh, no. I just heard the names. I don't know them. They don't ring a bell? Oh, they do ring a bell, but not with my activities. I don't know them at all. I just read about them, and I don't want to bring them in with the reality of what I know. Certainly. Well, it has been very interesting in any case, and I don't know when Harold will be out here again, but I know that he would enjoy meeting you, and when he does come, and I am sure that can be arranged. In any case, remember that I called, and there wasn't, and that wasn't your home phone, was it? Am I talking to you from there? That is my business and home phone, both. It's a little printing business. Well, I can be in touch with you in any case. I'm very grateful for your call, and that is all I can say. Well, these guys are batting their brains out. I don't know what their angles are. They may be very honest, upstanding, non-political, non-religious people that are really trying to do their job, and I'd like to think that was the case. It doesn't really matter what their real motivations are. The point is they are fishing around and finding out a whole lot of things, and I don't want to be embroiled in the middle of it when they fish my name out of the hat, if you know what I mean. I'd rather blow the whistle now and get it over with. If someone used it, then I am in the clear. You speak about people knowing how to fly airplanes. You know, it was speculated that a plane did take off or was scheduled to take off at Redbury Field at Dallas. That's Redbird Field, actually. At Dallas the afternoon of the assassination. Oh, I never heard that. Yes, it is one of the articles by one of the authors of the case. Somebody felt the plane really did take off from Mexico or South American countries. Okay, so let me just touch real quick on the Redbird Airport incident. The Redbird Airport incident was George Bush and Barbara Bush leaving in Tony Zoppi's plane. Okay, so the plane makes a loop from Redbird Airport to Love Field. back to Redbird Airport. It then takes off again. It tells the air traffic controller it's going to head one direction. It heads the opposite direction, and then it disappears, right? Allegedly, nobody knows who the hell was on it. Well, when you go and you read the letter from Barbara Bush about their activities in Dallas, you will find that the activities described by Barbara Bush match the activities of the airplane that left from Redbird Airport. So my conclusion is that the Redbird Airport incident involved George Bush and Barbara Bush and Mr. Zeppo's plane. So, but you can Google all that shit. We'll talk about it another time. Yes, that is in one of the articles by one of the authors on the case. Somebody felt that a plane really did take off from Mexico or one of the South American countries. I know Gabaldon flew a lot of miles back and forth. Look, here's a very simple solution. Gabaldon naturally wouldn't be involved directly. He might even be sitting there in an airplane. I don't know. I don't care about that. But where's Billy Seymour that day, to whom I think you know, run upstairs and put Uncle on the spot? I really think that. He was just a dirty little rat like some of these people who are trying to make a name for themselves. These big movies heroes. All right, let me fucking stop right there because that is one of the most important paragraphs ever. But where was Billy Seymour that day, to whom I think you know, run upstairs and put Uncle on the spot? What does he mean there? You know, run upstairs and put Uncle on the spot. I really think that. He was just a dirty little rat, like some of these people who are trying to make a name for themselves. These big movies heroes. So my boy Antonio found Billy Seymour. Billy Seymour's alive, living in Phoenix. Or was it Tucson? I don't remember. It's one of the two. I have his address and his phone number to the business. He started a fucking surveying company, land surveying company. He's like 86 years old. Probably don't work there anymore. It's probably his kids. But guess what? Now that I know where his kids are, I'll have forever to go and talk to them. He's never going to say a goddamn word. If he was ever going to talk, he would have talked by now. William Seymour was the person impersonating Oswald inside the book depository because Oswald didn't work there. Oswald was not stopped by Baker and Truly in the second floor lunchroom with drinking a Coke. Total nonsense. William Seymour was stopped by Baker and Truly on the third or fourth floor in the stairwell, where he's definitely not Oswald because at this point he's wearing a light tan jacket. But we're going to cover that another time. So, did these people have expertise, firearms, and weapons? Well, yes. I learned stuff myself, and they had people who wrote manuals by hand and passed them around to the Greeks that were training on No Name Key. That's the name of the key. That's No Name. There was also a place near New Orleans. They had expertise there. There was a local guy training them there, a Canadian, and Howard and several others. What they wanted from us was medicine. If you've got a wound, they wanted to throw powder on it. What kind of powder it is, I forget now. And aspirin and stuff like that in case they were wounded, you see. So they knew all the fundamentals of killing, wounding. They knew all the fundamentals in a raid. I would say Howard was an expert because he sure taught an awful lot of men in the army, Castro's. I don't give a hoot about any of those people anymore. I think they've used me up. I don't want to be around when the axe falls, and at the same time, I want to see it fall. Oh, that's fucking brutal. Ooh, I don't want to be around when the axe falls, and at the same time, I want to see it fall. Oh my God, I should get that tattooed on me. You want to get your information out while you still have the chance? Right. And these birds, which I did definitely imagine was the case were involved, whether Oswald was or not doesn't matter. I still think he was doing the same job I was. Before I even read a word of it, I knew it. That Oswald was down here. Something is redacted, and then it says, I'm the one brought his old lady on the Joe Pine show. He's talking about his mom. He's talking about Marguerite Oswald. I'm the one who brought his old lady on the Joe Pine show. Did you see that? No, I didn't. I heard that she was here, though. That was in 1965. I appeared down there and I told briefly what I was involved in, and I said, you know, I got the impression your son was doing the same thing I was. They shut me up, and I think the Federal Bureau wouldn't even speak to me again because they told me to shut my trap, see? Then tell me, can I reach you at this number? When is the best time to call, or do you want to leave it just as where you can reach me? Well, it would be sensible just to have it that way, wouldn't it? All right, whatever you like. But this is a good time to call me early in the morning, and I will transfer some of this to Harold if you like. At least I will give him a report on the facts as they are. What do you think of General Walker? I mean, you say you know Walker? This is some of my favorite stuff right here. Oh my God, this statement here played a big part in my conclusions that Oswald was not involved with the shooting at Walker's house, right? Because Oswald never ordered the rifle because the money orders are fake. So the people who shot at Walker's house were Howard and Seymour, right? And this helped me finalize because I had that suspicion for a long time, but I couldn't figure out which of the cast of characters fit the descriptions. But then once I realized what was going on, I realized, holy shit, it was William Seymour. What do you think of General Walker? I mean, you say you know Walker. Do you think it's true that he might be involved? First of all, you know that Oswald was to have taken a shot at General Walker. I don't believe it. I think Howard took a shot. Or you think Howard took a shot? Certainly. He was in Dallas with all those other crumbs. I don't believe Oswald did it. I don't care, you see. I don't want to try to prove anything. I'm just trying to tell you who did what and why. Well, Oswald supposedly had someone with him. There were perhaps two people involved in it. Like Billy Seymour and Howard, who was always hauling his big Mexican carcass around trying to pull some kind of caper. Oswald was a fink, just like I was. A fink for the feds. Let's face it, we did things that we were completely opposed to. We committed treason for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, you know what I mean? The things we blame the committee for doing, we did. We led them, we organized them, we would do the things that would put us in such a light, such a position, and would even go take a shot at someone if we had to, if that was a part of us getting to infiltrate some organization. There it is horrible but true. And then it was very likely that Oswald did intend to infiltrate, never intending to hit, you know. It is something that bears investigation if possible. The very cover-up of the situation, obliterations here and of other things, indicates some more things which I am glad to see people investigate it. Do you think it's conceivable when Oswald went to Mexico City that he was endeavoring to see Gabaldon, or was Gabaldon there at the time? Exactly what I'm thinking. Look at Billy Seymour. And another thing Gabaldon told me that hit me pretty hard, and I hated his guts for it. Not hate him, I wouldn't burn his house down, but I hated him because he said later on, before Kennedy died, quote, "I know a guy that looks just like you." Now here's me, a picture of me. I'm going around wearing a Texas hat. I got a rifle, and I go out and I shoot all the time, and Gabaldon knows this. I'm a chewing tobacco Texas hat wearing gunman, you get it? He got this picture of me like I'm some kind of big fat fool. He's telling me I got a guy that looks exactly like you, and said, "Poor bitch," and so forth. But he told me this several times and gave me the impression he was trying to tell me something. Then later on I realized, by God, it could have been under one of these Billy Seymour deals, trying to get me with my own reputation as an NRA member and as a shooter to get me involved in all this deal. So this isn't from somebody else investigated. This is what I realized later on, and it worried me plenty. Holy shit! Holy shit. That's fucking stunning. Stunning. Anyway, it is a long, miserable situation, and with both people, it was hate drove them forever forward, and I suppose with a little money too, but more than actual hate than money. I think that is obvious. I think I better hit the trails as I'm holding you up there. I think in any case, we appreciate it and we'll be in touch. A good show. Okay, thank you so much. Bye now. Wow. There's a lot more on Jules Rico Kimball, and we're definitely 110% going to be covering every single page of his files. But I don't know when. We'll do it soon. If you haven't noticed, the various files that I've been pulling, they seem to flow together. They connect with each other, right? And so I'm kind of trying to get everything. We haven't done Howard and Seymour and all this stuff yet because nothing has flowed to it, but this has. So perhaps in the next couple days we'll cover that stuff. All right, this is a handwritten letter here. Let's see what this is all about. Dated April 7th, 1969. To a Mr. Jim, looks like a Gochik, ADA, from Captain F.A. Sewell, senior investigator. Subject, names and addresses given by arrested homosexuals who are attending a party for perverts on 22562 at 3000 Edenbourne Street, located in Jefferson Parish. Okay, so this is probably going to be the Philip Geraci stuff. The Philip Geraci stuff is a weird aberration in the Kennedy assassination because it ties in all the gay stuff, right? And all these guys got arrested at the same time, and these guys all connect to the David Ferry crew, right? And Bo Boof and whatnot. And but I haven't really ascertained much like legitimate relevance to it, other than there was probably some CIA fucking shenanigans going on. You know, it seems like in New Orleans in 1962 and 1963, you could throw a fucking rock and you'd hit somebody who worked for the goddamn CIA. All right, so all subjects were white males. Donald L. Allen, 520-33, 5'11", 165, 2213, Brainerd, born past Christian. Hang on a second. Where is this located? Is this down in New Orleans? Because if it is not New Orleans, we might be back on Raymond Broshears again, because remember, he got arrested at the sit-in and then ended up doing 6 months. Let me see if I can find his fucking name on here. All right, no. Okay, no. This is definitely the Philip Geraci stuff. Which hopefully I can just fucking skip it all, honestly. Let me see, more names. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people arrested at this big orgy party that they had, and all these fucking guys were connected to Ferry and whatnot. And so, I honestly, I don't really fucking see the point. So, all right, so we are now apparently back to Raymond Broshears. We apparently have a duplication of a file from yesterday. I'm not going to read it. Talking about, Ferry's alleged confession to Broshears, which was mostly bullshit. Talking again about Thomas Beckham. All right. So it looks like there's a lot of duplication of information in this particular file, so I might call it unless I find something new. Okay, so here we go. This is, we talked about this a little bit. This appears to be a draft of an article, August 5th, 1968, by Stephen Jaffe, and it is titled, Ferry Confessed His Involvement in John Kennedy's Assassination Plot. Ex-roommate reveals. The first public disclosure of a confession by any of the participants in the conspiracy which led to the Dallas assassination of President Kennedy was revealed in surprising fashion recently on the Stan Borman Tempo 1 television show in Los Angeles. An ex-roommate of the late David Ferry appeared on the program as a last-minute guest. The roommate, Reverend Raymond Broshears of Long Beach, was asked to replace a guest who had been scheduled to discuss psychic phenomena and predictions of the future. After introductory comments were made, the program, which is in the format of receiving questions from outside telephone callers, became one of significant historical importance. In response to one of the caller's questions, the Reverend told of his associations with the late David Ferry of New Orleans. Ferry was named by District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans as one of the participants in the conspiracy which ended in the murder of President Kennedy. Garrison said, of Ferry, he was one of history's most important individuals. The caller questioned Reverend Raymond Broshears, and much to the shock of the host Stan Borman, Broshears answered the questions frankly. When asked if Ferry told him of the assassination conspiracy, his former roommate replied, David admitted being involved with the assassins. There's no question about that. Reverend Broshears, who has tried to escape harassment by individuals from mysterious sources ever since his short association with Ferry in 1965, told of the role which Ferry had played in the plot. He was in Houston at the time. Mr. Garrison has him in Houston with an airplane waiting, reported Broshears. The Reverend said that Ferry had intended to fly the assassins on the second leg of a getaway trip, which to carry them, at least two of the gunmen, first to South America and then to South Africa. The location in Africa was chosen as a final destination because that country has no extradition agreement with the United States. Ferry was waiting in the Houston airport that Friday afternoon when the two assassins, having just murdered President Kennedy, fled in a light aircraft from the landing strip just outside of Dallas. Instead of going straight to Houston as was arranged, the assassins tried to make their escape all the way to Mexico without stopping. According to Reverend Broshears, the assassins died in a plane crash that afternoon off the coast of Corpus Christi. Broshears said that Ferry had been a nervous wreck in the days of their acquaintanceship. This was over a year before the public disclosure of the investigation of Jim Garrison, and according to a recent article in Ramparts magazine by William Turner, Garrison hadn't even begun his secret probe until the latter half of '66. Broshears told of Ferry's fears that someone was going to kill him. "No matter what happens, I will never commit suicide," Ferry had told the Reverend. He was emphatic about this, Broshears reiterated. Honestly, like I said the other day, don't think I believe that. I just don't. Ferry prepared a written will in his own handwriting right before his death. What do you make of that? A guy who's not planning on dying anytime soon doesn't make out his own will. Broshears said that he knew David Ferry had been murdered, and thus confirmed another portion of Garrison's analysis of the evidence since his probe began. More questions in the assassination matter are added by the case of David Ferry. Aside from his mysterious death, the strange activities of Ferry on November 22nd, 1963 had led Garrison to arrest him for questioning when Ferry returned from his trip to Houston. After the district attorney's office questioned Ferry, they referred him to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for further questioning and examination by the Warren Commission. As in most instances, the Warren Commission never questioned Ferry, who, it is evident, might have shed considerable light on the true events of the assassination. Compounding the federal negligence is the fact that the FBI did question Ferry, and the 48-page transcription of the interview has been committed to the National Archives for the duration of 75 years from the issuance of the Warren Report. You know, I don't know if that's available. I don't think that's available. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't believe any of the interviews in the David Ferry files are that. The interviews of David Ferry in the David Ferry files are from fucking Garrison. There is not a single FBI interview of David Ferry that I can recall ever having read, and I've read well over 100,000 pages of raw documents. So, fuck. Reverend Broshears was asked by the caller if he was ever arrested for threatening the life of President Johnson. Most reluctantly, he replied that he had been, but he qualified the implication, saying that it was for the love of his country that such an incident transpired. He did not actually threaten President Johnson, and he explained that he does not believe in killing. "What then, Borman puzzled, did you say?" At the risk of being rearrested for repeating a statement that had caused Secret Service agents to take the Reverend into custody 2 years ago, Broshears stated, "I said that Mr. Johnson, the person who was responsible directly or indirectly for the assassination of President Kennedy, should be put to death." With the energy of 10 men and the breath of a parakeet, Borman activated his lips to form the words, "We'll be right back," after this word from arid extra dry. But the shock which characterizes most of the assassination revelations did not stop there. Broshears' admissions, however courageous or honest, have meant nothing but total torture and harassment for him ever since the television program. Since the time of his arrest by federal agents in New Orleans for the incident of his alleged threat on President Johnson, after which he was questioned and released without conviction or sentence, he has had to be in constant touch with federal offices of the Secret Service and FBI by the order of the federal government. Agents from those organizations have warned him to keep his mouth shut or risk being committed to a mental institution. After the television program, Broshears was served by his landlady, Miss Norma L. Smith, with a 7-day limit eviction notice. Phone calls from anonymous sources told him, "How many presidents did you kill today, Reverend?" And 2 reporters from the Sunday supplement of the Long Beach Press-Telegram newspaper have penned an article for this Sunday's edition which will reveal that Reverend Broshears is a homosexual. A friend of the Reverend's on Long Beach police force confided that the article would not be favorable to him at all. Broshears realizes that the price of breaking his silence on the case could certainly bring damaging comments about him and possibly endanger his life. Ironically, Broshears never tried to hide the fact that he's a homosexual. He answered, "I am a homosexual, but I have never denied it. Homosexuality is often used as a source of smear material, but that is usually in the case of a person who would be damaged by that public revelation. Broshears' only fault or sin seems to be his persistent honesty." Apparently, freedom of speech is something which Broshears has always taken as a cause to defend. When an attack was waged by Reverend John C. Bonner of the Long Beach Lakewood area to try to halt the sale of the Los Angeles Free Press in the March of 1968, Broshears replied to the aggressor in a modest but outspoken newspaper article published by Broshears called The Light of Understanding. Broshears replied the government's Bonner's limited acceptance of journalistic freedom. In the Bible, it states that if you raise your children rightly, you need not fear, he wrote. Where the Reverend Bonner had requested that the representative of some 47 area churches stand up and be counted, Broshears answered, stand up and be counted as what? A person who opposes freedom of the press? The result of this small but noble defense, Reverend Broshears was expelled from the ministerial alliance of his district. Another Los Angeles broadcaster, Elliot Mintz of KPFK, invited Reverend Broshears on his show. Responding to his tremendous audience interest in the events surrounding the murder of President Kennedy, Mintz questioned Broshears on his association with Ferry. After callers quizzed the Reverend, there was not enough time allowed for the Reverend to discuss his night ministry school, which is his occupation in Long Beach. Although the program closed without the discussion of some of the Reverend's work in the community revelations field, finding help for Skid Row bums, improving conditions in the ghettos, the oversight time promised the Reverend show became corrected by the show's host. Mintz told me if Mr. Broshears would like to come on our show to discuss his work and his night ministry school and not discuss his association with David Ferry, he has a standing invitation for me to do that. It is impossible to estimate the truth or falsehood of the Reverend's statements about the assassination. It is certain that in his association with Ferry, he had the unique opportunity to learn what Ferry might have told the New Orleans grand jury had he lived. In the case of the assassination of President Kennedy, it seems apparent that those with important knowledge who speak out risk death. Something, I can't read it because it's fuzzy and in handwriting. Reverend Broshears explains this puzzle in a different way. He says the price of silence, and then the article cuts off. So, now we have a document from Jim Garrison, Broshears number 3, it looks like. Reference David Ferry, Clay Shaw, F. Lee Chrisman, Odd Churches, Leighton Martins, and Thomas E. Beckham. So we've talked already multiple times about the weird churches, and I think that this is going to be along those same lines. Basically, you have to take everything Raymond Broshears says kind of, with a grain of salt. Because he's lying about a lot of stuff. Because he worked with the CIA. Was he this gay preacher guy who then got busted, who then got converted to be a rat? Who the hell knows? All I know is that his relationship with intelligence, it lasted all the way into the 1970s. So, August 9th, 1968, from Stephen Jaffe to Reverend Broshears, interviewed in Assistant District Attorney's Office James Alcock on this date. Now, the Universal Life Church was formed in 1960 as an association. Who formed the church? And Broshears says, the church at the time was formed by a Dr. Kirby J. Hensley, formerly from the state of North Carolina. He is an illiterate in this respect. He cannot read, nor can he write. The Universal Life Church was incorporated on the 2nd of May, 1962. Can you say where? It was incorporated in Modesto. It was incorporated as a Church of God under the Universal Life Church of Modesto Incorporated. Mr. Hensley drew up the papers, took them up to, or drew his wife to draw, or had his wife draw them up, due to his illiteracy. He fooled you quite well, but he does know his Bible by heart. That's through learning it from his parents. But he took these papers, typed up very crudely on ordinary stationery, went to the Sacramento and bullied his way and pleaded and cajoled his way through Sacramento. And this is entirely unheard of because I've talked with many corporate lawyers in the state of California and they cannot understate how he was granted a corporate charter, how he was granted articles of incorporation when you have to do it on a legal form, but yet he did it. And I have a photostatic copy of his articles of incorporation, which are done up that way. I really wonder how in the state of California this guy got a fake church up off the ground without paperwork. Can anybody think of a way that they might have done that? I can't possibly... Nah, couldn't have been the CIA, could it? And to me, it is quite appalling because there are strikeovers marked out, and I know the corporate board of the state of California did not allow this because they have turned down many of my applications for corporation on legal paper because it was not spaced properly. And yet Dr. Hensley put in something that was absolutely atrocious. This I've always thought a bit weird. Now, you said it's spread to 8,000 members, 3,800 outside the United States. I did not say members. Ministers? No, you said members. I said ministers. Okay. I said ministers last night. There are now 8,000 ministers, affiliate membership numbers somewhere near 100,000 now. Where are the branches of the church outside the U.S.? You mentioned there were 14 foreign countries. In Europe, there is England, Sweden, Italy in particular. I have a list of all the ones in Italy, and then Uganda in the continent of Africa, and several of the new emerging African nations. The people have been named bishops and the like for this, for their ego purposes, and they're growing quite large. In fact, the head of the bishop of the Uganda church is the defense minister there of Uganda. I think that is very interesting. What is his name? I can't pronounce any of those black names. You forgot. Yeah, you forget it. I got it at home. Will you send it back? Send us? I'll send it to Mr. Alcock, yes. Now, do you know, for example, you just stated that the defense minister of Uganda is the head of the Universal Life Church there. 10,000 members in his church in Uganda. He won't have it for long. It's more of a political party than anything religious. Can you say another country where possibly a defense minister or another member of the government is known to you would be involved? I think you're projecting a bit because I don't know these people's positions. I know the mayor of a town in the country of Guatemala is the head of the Universal Life Church in his city, but he is not the head of the church in Guatemala. Dr. Hensley is the head of the church in Guatemala. Dr. Hensley of Modesto? Yes, he is the head of the church in Guatemala. Does he go to Guatemala to take part in it? No, he's never been there. He just, all through correspondence, there are several ministers in Guatemala, Honduras, British Honduras, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, one of the Somoza brothers. I don't know whichever one that is still alive. He wrote for our papers. He's been granted ministers and bishops' papers with the Universal Life Church. Now he has heard of it. How he's heard of it, I do not know. And I understand that Somoza is a very good conservative Roman Catholic, and it has puzzled me why he wanted the bishop's papers to the Universal Life Church. But this is not for me to wonder. As Dr. Hensley says, it is none of my business. I've gone through Dr. Hensley's files quite extensively. Dr. Carl McIntyre has papers within the Universal Life Church. What kind of papers? Ordination papers, bishop's papers, as does Herbert W. Armstrong of Pasadena, who publishes the Plain Truth magazine, and the international broadcasts is most extensive to all English-speaking nations in the world, called The World Tomorrow under Ted Armstrong. And of course they of the I cannot fathom why the Somoza brothers would want ordination papers. There is only one left that I know of the Somoza brothers. I don't know too much about them. But this is typical of Dr. Hensley's operation. He says, I will give ordination papers to anyone who writes me. All they have to do is write me in care of the Universal Life Church, 1766 Poland Road, Modesto, California. And I will send them ordination. And he says he does not care who they are or what they're going to preach. They can preach hate. They can preach whatever they want because all they have to do is have God within. This is Dr. Hensley's basis for giving out all these ordinations that he gives out. Hensley has operations in 14 different countries, and I do not know the extent. The Italian one seems to be fairly great. The one in Sweden alarms me. As a person, it is my own personal observation, but he does have operations in Sweden. Several ministers over there. I do know 2 recent deserters from the United States Armed Forces. What branch I do not know, have written for ordination, and they have been granted by Kirby Hensley. Of course, Kirby Hensley is known for his helping of draft dodgers, granting them ordinations. But of course, not all the draft boards are granting for the divinity classification because they have done this. I feel very strongly that I'm, keeping my feelings out of it. Numerous intelligence men in the Long Beach Police Force have ordination papers with Universal Life Church, the LAPDSO, the Sheriff's Office Intelligence. Also, FBI Long Beach, and I know FBI office in numerous places have ordination papers with the Universal Life Church. Now, these papers, they can get them under any name they want. They can use an alias because they don't have to furnish any proof that it is their name. So many people are using these now for many devious purposes. Of this, I am sure. Now, these papers, I want to reiterate, are perfectly legal and valid papers, and people using these papers to impersonate ministers are some really using them for legitimate purposes. People who do not have the college education are using them. One of the things I wanted to point out with the San Francisco office of the FBI is agent known to me as Manning has a universal life ordination. This is one FBI man outside of Joe Conlon at the Long Beach office who has bishop's papers. There are a Mr. Newman of the United States Secret Service has ordination papers, but under another name. He told me that he wrote for them under another name. Also, all of the FBI men in San Jose have ordination papers, but under other names. This I feel I am responsible for. It is my fault to a very great degree, and I am not going to apologize for it. But the country Canada is one that I really overlooked to men as important part of the Universal Life Church. Now, this is tied in with Mr. Tom Beckham and some kook in Ontario. I've got the name and address of the man Beckham recently visited in Ontario in connection with his particular churches, the Holy Orthodox Christian churches, which he made me a bishop of. Holy, 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 ha ha, but Beckham's organization is not a valid organization in the state of California. So any papers that he sends me subsequently mean nothing as far as my own activities in the state of California. Beckham and Hensley have never met as of 3 months ago. Now Beckham is out on the West Coast at this moment selling ordinations, and various people are trying to trace him down and locate Beckham. Beckham brags, it seems now, as of his associations with David Ferry, but he cannot spell Ferry's name right. This appalls me. He spells Ferry's name Ferry, and he said that he is not a homosexuality person, but he can't even use proper English, but I'm not so great myself. But anyhow, Beckham had a great tie with Ferry. This is how Beckham got into the ministry, was through Ferry here in the city of New Orleans. As I related to Mr. Garrison last night, Ferry got into the ministry of the Old Catholic Church through this kook James up in Canada somewhere. That's what Ferry claims, but I have conflicting reports that on that from Michael Itkin, who it seems that Garrison knows. Michael Itkin is a cardinal or bishop or pope, anything you want to name. He's it, and had currently been stirring up trouble in the San Francisco Haight-Ashbury and in the Berkeley area Telegraph. Hang on, let me stop right there. So, at this time that he's talking about in Haight-Ashbury is the exact same time that the Grateful Dead were getting their start. And we know that the Grateful Dead, and don't get me wrong, I am a fucking lifelong Deadhead. All the acid that was given for the Grateful Dead parties in upstate New York with Ken Kesey and the pranksters and all that stuff, that all came directly from the CIA. And here we got this guy talking about people in Haight-Ashbury doing this fake church shit in the exact same time that stuff was going on. Interesting, huh? Itkin has his own corporate body called the Holy Evangelical Catholic Communion Brotherhood of Love, and Itkin, was exposed for myself in the city of San Francisco, but it did no good because now it seems that Itkin hang on a second. I'm pausing here because Itkin is hitting a nerve here with me. Itkin, I believe, was also an alias used by a man connected directly to George de Mohrenschildt. But I'm going to have to look into that. It's ringing a bell really hard, and I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. Itkin has his own corporate body called the Holy Evangelical Catholic Communion Brotherhood of Love, and Itkin, was exposed for myself in the city of San Francisco, but it did no good because now it seems that Itkin is getting from mysterious sources and is able to print these documents and papers and is growing quite fast and quite large. God damn, what a run-on sentence that was. Hensley got into the so-called draft dodging or helping the anti-drafters through myself quite innocently, maybe. Or maybe I got into it quite innocently. I can't figure out just what, but some young men wanted to be student ministers in my church in San Francisco, which was called the Universal Church of Light, which was located at 465 Garrick Studio B. It's a music studio. Madam Rosalie Zarga is the manager. Reverend Angelina Miller and Reverend Gerta Mays, who are both listed. Reverend Gerta Mays is listed in the directories. Reverend Angela Miller is not, but she is listed in our magazine. Her private telephone number is listed in the Light of Understanding. These people were all on my staff of the church in San Francisco. Young men hippies started coming to me asking to be student ministers. I later learned for their only purpose for being ministers was to escape the draft. So when I learned, I spoke to them rather harshly, and it ended their association with me. But by this time, they had already gone to Modesto. Kirby Hensley gave them the ordination papers, and this was the beginning of Kirby Hensley's anti-draft work, which has been publicized in the New York Times extensively, which led to a CBS telecast by Mr. Terry Drinkwater. And this was on CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite, CBS Late Night News, Local Los Angeles, and CBS Morning News with Douglas the next morning. Anyhow, Hensley, this is how he got into it, or maybe the anti-draft movement. Hensley is not, of course, he does not profess to be anti-draft, but I do think it is strange because after this I personally contacted the Attorney General of the state of California, Mr. Tom Lynch, and Mr. Frank Jordan, the Secretary of State who has control over such matters as the corporate bodies existing in their state. Mr. Lynch and Mr. Jordan both told me that Dr. Kirby Hensley, they can find nothing wrong with his operation, even though I had pointed out the CBS telecast, the New York Times disclosures, and the disclosures over the wire services. Associated Press and United Press International, and yet these men stated election officials, appointed officials, Mr. Jordan, most of his people. Mr. Jordan is elected, he's elected every year. He has been in so long, I thought he was appointed. He's been in about 30 years. But anyhow, these gentlemen told me they can find nothing wrong with Kirby Hensley's operation, and they wanted to question me as to why I was coming up to them, asking to close him down when I used to be a part of Dr. Hensley's operation, and I told them that Dr. Hensley used to be an honorable, honest man, but now he has gone into what I feel things that are detrimental to the security of the country of the United States. I have seen other people prosecuted and sent to prison for doing the things far minor against the draft than what Kirby Hensley said on Coast to Coast TV and is currently doing. He now has 8,000 ministers. Of these 8,000, I would have to say very truthfully, because I know this to be a fact, over 3,000 of them are draft dodgers, and I want to say of the 3,000 draft dodgers that approximately 1,800 have received 4D divinity classifications from their draft boards. And I want to point out to you that when they receive a 4D classification, they cannot be drafted, nor can their classification be changed. My understanding of the selective service laws in the state of California, Dr. Kirby Hensley's organization is incorporated in 27 other states. This is something I neglected to mention earlier. 27 other states, this being the state of Nevada, the latest, I should say. He plans to have it incorporated in every single state of the union. Where he is getting the money for this is really beyond me. Come on, where is he getting the money? CIA. Where Kirby Hensley is getting the money to go all along, this is beyond me because he never has. I want to repeat, he has never advertised in any publication, major or minor, with the exception of our magazine, The Light of Understanding, and Kirby Hensley's advertising in there just says merely Universal Life Church, Modesto, California, and gives the address, but it does not say get an ordination or buy an ordination or anything. But I want to point out that Dr. Hensley does not sell his ordinations. He gives them to you for free, scot-free. He does not sell them. So I want to emphasize this over and over, and I would appreciate Mr. Ivan and everyone in this. I would appreciate everyone in this particular office write to Dr. Hensley under assumed names with post office boxes, preferably, maybe general delivery or just anyone else's address, and write for the ministerial papers just to see how this does work. And sure enough, an ordination paper will arrive for them. I do not know this procedure on handing out the bishop's papers now. Usually, I can't really say how he hands out the bishop's papers. I was pointing out earlier about the Bishop of Uganda. Hensley is on the board of Tom Beckham's American Academy of Professional Arts, as is Fred Lee Chrisman of Tacoma, Washington, and vice versa, in all the other organizations. Michael Itkin, who heads up the Evangelical Catholic Communion, which I talked about earlier for a moment, have extensive information on Itkin's bullshit, which I will send to the New Orleans office on this particular portion because I did not know that Itkin had been in New Orleans and had been the great source of trouble that had been in this city. Moreland Ballard of Baltimore is the man who supposedly, I want to point this out, supposedly ordained David Ferry. Now, I have no way of checking. I do have ways of checking this out, but I would have to have permission from Mr. Garrison or one of his Mr. Alcock, the two men who are involved in the litigation of this particular investigation, because I do not want to embarrass them by going to San Francisco and talking with the various people there in the evangelical community and ask them this thing, because Itkin, I want to point out, Itkin has never met Ferry. Itkin has met Tom Beckham. And of course, Itkin has met Ballard. I have spoken with Ballard long distance on the telephone from San Jose when I was helping the FBI with the investigation of Students for Democratic Society in San Jose. But let me add, the investigation in San Jose was not of my doing. That was the suggestion of certain people in the federal government that I assisted because I had too many people who were attending San Jose State College who were involved in SDS, and I did my dirty deed. I'm not going to try to justify it. I'm not going to say that I'm ashamed of it, because at the time I didn't, and that's it. But anyhow, I'm starving to death right now. When I talked to Ballard in Baltimore, Ballard said that he knew nothing of Itkin, except that Itkin came through Baltimore. Itkin was a hypocritical, egotistical little bastard who wanted to connect up with the old Catholic Church, of which Ballard claimed he was the metropolitan bishop. I have seen papers to this effect that say that Ballard is the metropolitan bishop of it, but Ballard said that he was. I did not ask Ballard anything about New Orleans or anything about this nature. But as far as Itkin in New Orleans, I know nothing. I'm pausing here because my mind is in overdrive, trying to recall the details of the Itkin connected to George de Mohrenschildt. And I fucking can't. I hate this that this is live, because I can't just go pull up my notes. I'm sorry, that's not how I do this show. So I'm going to have to research that and then discuss Itkin a little more. Let me finish up another paragraph or so, and then I'm going to call it for the night, because this Itkin thing is driving me up a fucking wall. I have seen papers to this effect, but they say that Ballard is the metropolitan bishop of it. But Ballard said that he was. I did not ask Ballard anything about New Orleans or anything of this nature. But as far as Itkin in New Orleans, I know nothing. I knew nothing until last night that Itkin had ever been to this particular area. I know Itkin has a fantastic hatred. Itkin is a homosexual, a rather flagrant homosexual, wanton. But Itkin has never mentioned even being to this city. Itkin is much younger than myself. I am 33. Itkin, I would say, is closer to 27, maybe 28. He could be older, but I doubt very seriously. I'm sure Mr. Garrison knows the 20th Century Reformation Church is McIntyre's organization. They're associated with the Billy James Hargis anti-communist crusade, this Christian crusade that is throughout the South, the Bible Belt, in which he rakes in the shekels from the little lambs. And McIntyre is also associated with Fred Schwartz in the city of Long Beach, where I reside, and his anti-communist Christian crusade. Fred Schwartz is about as anti-communist as Fidel Castro. I've been asked questions by Mr. Jaffe concerning one Edgar Eugene Bradley. All right. So, Edgar Eugene Bradley. That is a good stopping point. Now, I'm going to try to not do a show tomorrow. If I do a show tomorrow, it means I didn't work on the book. And everybody should be pissed at me. So, I'm going to try really hard to work on the book tomorrow, not do a show. And then when we come back on, what the fuck day is it? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. When we come back on Thursday, I will pick up with my research on Itkin, and we'll discuss Edgar Eugene Bradley, and we will finish up this Reverend Raymond Broshears files. So, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't pre-ordered my book yet, I highly suggest you do it within the next month or so. buymeacoffee.com/JFKbook. And I think that's about it for today. So tune in on Thursday, and we will pick it up from right here.